Good afternoon, everybody. This is the hardcore, isn't it? After 2 days of a festival and England in a final for the first time in a long time, look at you. Thank you for being here. This talk, as was just introduced, is about AI and whether using AI is cheating if you use it in marketing. So what I hope to do is to describe to you a little bit about what I describe as AI, and how that's employed, how we came to use it in marketing. And then I'll give you some comparisons towards the end of other places in life where AI has been used. And you can choose whether the answer to the question is yes, it's cheating, or no, it isn't. Just as a little bit of background, because you may wonder how I got into this, I started off, I'm half Irish and half Egyptian, so I think I came into life blending data streams, because they're quite different, those two. And then kind of had a life around the world, being brought up in lots of different cultures. Eventually ended up being a psychologist and starting a market research company, selling it to WPP, running a couple of their global networks, and then clearing off to an island off the west coast of Ireland, where I sat doing a new job, which was both founding and running a brand called Inish Turk Beg, which you probably never heard of, but was a lot of fun. And we did music and whiskey. And so I would sit at my desk at 11 a.m., drinking whiskey and listening to music, and that was my job. And unfortunately, I couldn't get out of my mind that there was something else that could be done for brands, which was to make it a lot easier. What I noticed was that nearly all the household brands in the world are owned by about 2,000 corporations. Yet there are tens upon tens of millions of new brands birthed every day. Well, perhaps not every day, but there's an enormous flow of new brands. Challenger brands, some people call them. They're often just new brands making their way. And they often don't have the resources, intellectually or capital or any otherwise, really, or even the experience to succeed with branding and marketing. So I thought, it's all very well for the ones who have all the resources in place to kind of go about their business and kill it. But how about, the little brands that we're all trying to grow into being interesting parts of our culture and which bring new things to our lives? So I started focusing upon all that. And the weird thing is that my father came back to haunt me. This is my father. He died in 2005. I haven't called upon him often since then, but I am today. He was an epidemiologist, and I remember talking to him as a statistician, and he'd tell me the stories of how, in the Caribbean, mental illness was going to lead to, so many hospitalizations in the year 2016 or whatever. And he was able to model national health systems from numbers, and I always was fascinated by it. And then I became slightly ashamed of myself because I went and studied psychology and tried not to look another number in its face for quite a long time. And so I would just tell stories about people's feelings and thoughts. What's happened with creating an AI company is that those two things have come together. What AI has done for me is allow me to flow together once more different data streams, this time feelings and thoughts with numbers, to see where it gets us. And I think to explain that a bit further, and so as not to be too much of the kind of loose psychologist and to be slightly more the scientist here, I'd like to just take you through what it takes to create marketing AI, at least as I've defined it over the last few years, developing it with a team of about 100 people. And I'll take you around this reasonably quickly, but I think it's quite interesting. It's what is now referred to as hard tech. Deep tech is where you kind of go into a lab and make up some amazing thing. You bring it out to the world and say, hey, look what I've made. Can anybody use this thing? Hard tech is when you know what the problem is. In this case, brand management being pretty difficult and a very complex thing that we all try to get our hands around, and try to create a solution for that. So we started with psychology. We knew that we were living in a time of competitive convergence where pretty well all brands operate at kind of functional parity and you get the same sort of thing from them, but yet still some brands succeed way more than others. And that led us to understand that there was a thing driving it that lay beneath the surface, which is the power of a relationship that people have, the bond that is created between that entity, that brand, that series of values that a brand encapsulates, and the human being. So that led to us discovering that there are 16 drivers of relationships. We got that from psychology and also from sociology, from the theory of social exchange. Neuroscience told us, as we've all come to learn, it's nothing new here, but what we feel matters much more than what we say. I mean, you guys sitting in the audience will already have decided whether you're believing much of what I'm saying or whether I'm talking nonsense. And that's just the way it is. That's the way we operate. Sometimes you can persuade after you've failed to seduce, but generally you have to seduce first before you can persuade. So implicit response timing is a proxy for your subconscious, and we have to industrialize at a huge level. We've already got over 70 million measures of this in our system. How people feel about things without them articulating a word, just by the speed of their responses to things. We knew that if this was going to really democratize brand management and bring all those new brands to a much stronger place and give them certainty about what they were doing, then we had to have no user training required. This had to be intuitive and something you could just get your hands around. Artificial intelligence, I'm going to tell you a bit more about analysis and action in a minute, so I'll skip that one for now. But in marketing, I mean, there's quite a lot to learn. I mean, sometimes it seems very simple, but if you're a bit low on aspiration and you increase your distribution, you're going to make your aspiration even worse. But you can up your aspirational values sometimes by reducing your distribution. Yeah, we probably all know that in this room, but it's not intuitive. People have to think this through, and so we had to gather a whole pile of expert knowledge around marketing. Technology just had to get bigger and to accommodate and to extend as we learnt more things. Market research had to be broached because we wanted to talk to people every day. We wanted to have a daily interaction with people to really know what the lifeblood, what the pulse of brands and categories and competition and the responses to all the marketing investments that were being made really were. Data science, there's a thing called a brand knowledge graph that we're creating, which is a bit like what Google did when it created maps. It just basically says, we know how the world is mapped, and now you guys can do whatever you like with it. So we've had to create an understanding of categories, which one moves faster, which one moves slower, what disrupts them, what reinforces movements within them, and so on. And then we also wanted to present a business model that was incredibly simple for people to use. So it's kind of an always-on subscription that's very low cost. That was to make it accessible at volume rather than just serving the large enterprises that were already pretty well resourced. So with all of that kind of dealt with in hard tech, which has taken quite a lot of effort, there are two parts. There's analysis, which is where we look at a category, we see what people's needs are in that category, and then how well competitors are resolving those needs, and then where our customers' brands, we call them customers to make it lighter-footed than clients traditionally, and how those customer brands are also answering the category needs. So from all of this, you can begin to actually really understand the dynamics of a category and what needs to be done. It allows you to identify what your customer's brand needs to do. And you can be quite clever with AI to give people good control of it rather than it being a kind of runaway machine. So you can build it so that people can put in their goals and say the sorts of things that they want to use in order to get somewhere, rather than just the machine dumbly telling them what to do. So it's a very interactive system. And all of these things that you can see up on screen were kind of employed to get there. But all of that really is in order to lead us to this next thing, which is the most exciting bit, which is action, which is where artificial intelligence listens to you, says, what are your goals? What are your resources? What are you prepared to do? Okay, if that's the case, I know what's going on in your category, I know what's going on with your competitors, and here are the things that we recommend you do in order to achieve those goals that you've just set. So the action part is, I think, the most exciting part of where AI takes you. And it's a bit like, when you look at a Google map, it's pretty good, nicely mapped out. You can go from Shoreditch to Chelsea and you can see things along the way. But when you press another button and it says, go this way and you'll get there in 17 minutes, that's the cool bit, and that's what the action part is. So at the end of the day, marketing AI, as I see it, is composed of one big machine, action, analysis AI, which looks at the way brands light up in a particular analysis of their category and their competition, so that that information can be flowed through into the action AI, which then looks at all the things that we deal with. You can see them flipping there: partnerships, distribution, customer success, customer experience, packaging. There's a ton of marketing levers that we all pull every day. And in fact, one of the statisticians in our business came to me and said, do you know that there are more than 2 billion combinations that a brand manager could make in a year? And I thought it was stupid, just a ridiculous number, and asked for a new number and came back still saying it was over 2 billion. We tend to talk about only like 25 million because we think that's somehow more credible. But it's true that if you take all of the marketing levers and arrange them and switch them around and say, I could combine this one with this one with this one with this one and so on, you end up with this enormous number. How can anybody be expected to work through that in a logical kind of data-fed way? So marketing ends up being very much about intuition. And what this is trying to do is to say, actually, we can do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. We can get you to some certainty about what it is that you should do before you have to actually then execute it yourself. So certainty is really, I would say, what AI brings to marketing. And that's why the question in the talk said, taking out the, without the guesswork. What's certainty? There's all sorts of certainty. There's soft and there's hard certainty, I suppose. The soft stuff is you feel good about what you're doing. You just feel more certain about what you're about to do. Your team believes more in what you're saying is the right direction for the brand. The CEO, when she looks through all of her reports and looks at marketing, thinks, oh, crikey, what's this lot doing, spending all this money again? They have more confidence, they have more certainty that this is the right path to be going. There's much harder stuff too. One of our customers is Rustler's microwavable burgers, not the most famous brand in the world, but a pretty big one. I mean, they turn over 200 million quid or something in the UK alone. They raised, by following our directions and our guidelines through the Action AI, they came to a place that said, if you do these things with your packaging and your new proposition, and you talk about integrity and your supply chain, and all the other things that we told them to do, they had a 16% lift immediately upon relaunch. So there are lots of hard metrics about greater distribution, retailers listening to stories that brands tell them, and so on. Certainty can come in many different ways, but what it does is it reduces anxiety one way or the other and gives confidence to the people that are running brands that they're doing the right things. What it doesn't do is say, the great creative idea for Harpic would be, call it the cocaine of the toilet place or something. That's not going to come up out of our AI machine. But it will say that you need to think you need to be a bit more spectacular about trying to deploy Harpic in people's lives. So, having said that and given you some insight, I hope, into what constitutes marketing AI and some of the things that it brings with it, the question is it cheating? And I suppose if you think about some of the ways that your life has changed with AI, you can probably begin to guess where my answer is going to be. We used to use atlases, we use Google Maps, Blockbuster to Netflix. I mean, I hope you can see some of these logos here. Even our Apple Watches stand in for ECG machines from time to time now. So my contention is that artificial intelligence in marketing is a bit like artificial illumination in life. When you try to make your way without it, you're full of shadows, your destination is a harder and less certain place. And as soon as light comes into your life, you're more certain of where you stand, you're more certain of what surrounds you, you know which direction you should be walking in. And therefore, I think the question to ask is, if you believe that artificial illumination is a cheat in your life, then you probably should think that AI in marketing is a cheat too. But if you accept that it basically gets you to places with less danger and more certainty, then embrace it. And to end on a human note, I feel some redemption in joining my father in his statistical progress in life. And that's what AI has personally done for me. And thank you very much for coming along.